You know, one of the most important things a teacher can do is to answer those burning questions, the questions that arise in your classroom that you really need to solve, and solve quickly. Christina Bainbridge was one of those teachers, wondering why 7 of her second grade students were not progressing as well as others in reading fluency. I'd like to introduce you to her now. She's one of our Marygrove MAT graduates from 2009. She'll talk you through an aid to intervention that she developed, which helps struggling readers set and track their own goals for reading success. So, here she is. Christine Bainbridge, welcome.
Thank you, Diane. I'm happy to be here, and I'd like to thank Marygrove for having me today. Like Diane said, I'm Christina Bainbridge, and I've been teaching for 6 years. I teach first and second grade at Central Elementary in White Pigeon, Michigan. And when I was working on my master's program here at Marygrove, one of the courses that you take is a research course where you have to try to solve a problem in your classroom using research that you collect and data that you interpret. So the question that I posed in my classroom was whether having students set and chart their own progress in reading would help them reach their goal quickly, and if it would have any other effects in areas of reading such as comprehension, overall grade level, their motivation to read, and their enjoyment of reading. When I started the project, I kind of tried to answer the 5 W's. Who I was doing the research on is 7 of my students who were identified as being at risk or at some risk for reading failure by the DIBELS screener. DIBELS, if you're not familiar with it, it was developed by the University of Oregon, and it is a screener which in grades 2 and up tests students on their oral reading fluency and then places them into one of 3 categories, whether they're at risk, at some risk, or whether they are at a low risk for having reading failure by the end of 4th grade. So I had 7 students in my second grade class who were identified as being either at risk or at some risk in their oral reading fluency.
Christina, how many students were in your total class that year?
I had 20 students in my class that year. So 13 of them were benchmarked. They were at a low risk and did not need to be progress monitored, where the other 7 needed weekly progress monitoring tests.
I could see where a third of your classroom having trouble would become a burning question pretty quickly.
Absolutely. Like I said, what I did was I tested students weekly. That's part of the progress monitoring that we're required to do for DIBELS to collect the data. We test our students who need it every week. So I had the 7 that weekly were tested, and then they not only helped to set their goals, but they helped to chart their own progress each week. I collected the data for 7 weeks, but I continued to do the data setting and the goal tracking that I will show you in a moment until the end of the year, and that's something that I still do today in my classroom. And where it was in my second grade classroom at Central Elementary in White Pigeon, Michigan. The reason why I wanted to do this is we all know how important reading skills are to overall success of students, and so I wanted my students obviously to increase in their reading, and we hear a lot of buzz about having kids be involved in charting their own progress, but I wanted to know if it really made a difference. So I wanted to see if having them chart their progress and be part of their goal setting would impact their fluency and how it would impact their other areas of reading.
So Christina, when I look at this graph, the thing that jumps out at me is that some of these kids started off pretty low in April, and they seem to have finished a lot higher. Will we see more information like this?
Absolutely, and not only fluency, but other areas of reading as well. So if students actively set their own goals for oral reading fluency, will they make better progress than if they're left out? And that's what we're going to delve into today and try to figure out through the data that I have to share with you. At the beginning, I sat down with each of my students in March and we completed this sheet together so they could mathematically see where they were at and where they needed to be. So we took the number of words they read correctly on their last oral reading fluency assessment and subtracted that from the end of the year goal, which is 90 for DIBELS for second grade, to find the difference. The difference would be the number of words they needed to increase by the end of the year. Then we divided that by the number of weeks left in the year to find out how many words on average they would have to gain each week. And for some kids, that was a very daunting number. So we took that number and I said to the students what I thought they were capable of doing, and then we had conversation about that, and they also chose a goal that they thought they were capable of reaching by the end of the year. Their goal was up for negotiation. My goal was set for them on what I thought they could do. And then if they wanted to set their goal higher than mine, they were able to do that. And if they wanted to go lower, they could, because we talked about their goal each week and could always change it.
So were there any students who were reluctant to participate in this out of the 7, or were they all just happy little campers?
They were excited. I had explained to them what we'd be doing, how we'd be charting their progress. They'd get to make a graph and color their graph. It was exciting for them, and I think figuring it out this way where they could clearly see by 2nd grade, they understand a lot of these math concepts. They could clearly see the logic behind what we were doing and why we had to do it. So I think they were excited. After each test, this is a picture of the graph that we use. Students chart their own progress on the bar graph. So on the top of the graph is where I write the goal that I have for them, and then they write down the goal that they've developed for themselves. On the left-hand side, the scale is blank because some students have more to go, so their scale needs to look different. So we fill that in together. And then on the bottom, we date it each week after they take their test, and they color in the graph. And here is a graph in action. This is one of my current students showing off the graph that we have created for her. So this shows the actual data that I collected for the 7 students that I was working with in the study. And each student is represented by a different color on the graph, and it shows through the test points in the study how many words that they were gaining each week, so that I could see their growth. So this lays it out with the numbers, I think, so we can clearly see what was going on. What we hope is we hope that students will gain about a word a week. If they gain more than that, that's even better. So most of the students at least did a word a week, and many of them did much more than that. One of my students, student 6, they started at 68 and they ended at 68, so their overall gain was 0, but I really want us to remember student 6 for the other data we're going to look at, because it's really important to remember that oral reading fluency, though it's a good indicator, it is only one indicator of reading success. So I think student 6 is really going to help us realize the importance of overall pictures as readers and not just the one measure. So when I look at this graph, I see some pretty big numbers, especially for student 2. Do you think that that's the kind of, is that indicative of the kind of growth that you're getting right now when you do this in your class right now? I think so. I think at the end of the year, kids are really showcasing everything that they've learned all year, and this was at the end of the year. But later we'll get to see some other graphs of my current students, and it's very exciting to see the gains that they've made by charting their own progress. After we filled in the graph each week, my students and I had a lot of conversation. I think that's key to doing anything like this, is talking with your students. So I talked with my students about why they thought their words correct came out as they did. If they were higher than the week before, we talked a lot about what did you do at home, what did your family do to support you, what can you continue to do to grow. If they were lower than the week before, we talked about maybe changes they needed to make so that they could increase. And when I did the study, my students actually reflected on it in writing. Now we talk about it orally. And parents and school personnel who were responsible to provide instruction for these particular students, I also surveyed them to find out the attitudes that my kids had outside of class about reading and their motivation during the study. You know, I've got a couple of questions here that come to mind. One is, how much time does this take to do? Because time is always of an essence in the classroom. Well, each student, when they read, they only read for 60 seconds. So the actual reading portion takes about 60 seconds. Coloring in the graph is minimal. And then the conversation that I have with my students takes 1 to 2 minutes per student. So I would say no more than 5 minutes tops for each student, but it is time well spent and well invested.
This sounds like a fairly private process. Do you publicize any of this information? Do you share it on a bulletin board? Do you share it with their parents? Or is this pretty much a private conversation with you and your students?
We do celebrate student successes at the discretion of the student. So when I have a student whose graph we'll see later where we had to add to the graph because he's off the chart. He's one that wants to share with the class, so we celebrate successes when students are comfortable with that. And the survey said the results of what I found were that parents and other school staff, such as Title I parapros and other teachers, and my own observation showed that students really were more eager to read, especially when they knew they were going to be assessed. So the days before their reading assessment, the day of the assessment, and the days following, they were very eager to read because I think they knew we were going to talk about it. We were going to talk about what they had been doing and what they needed to do. So the students were motivated more to read. This is my favorite piece of data, one of them that I collected. This graph shows the number of accelerated reader quizzes that students in my class took the 7 weeks prior to beginning the goal setting, and then the gold bar is the 7 weeks of the actual intervention that I was using at that time. If you're not familiar with accelerated reader, it's where students read books and then they take quizzes on the computer to check their comprehension. And in my classroom, it is extremely self-directed. I'm greedy with my instructional time, and I don't like to use it for accelerated reader quizzes. But my students, when they finish their work, they take quizzes. I have a day a week where a parent comes in for about 90 minutes and helps kids take quizzes. But it's a very self-directed and self-motivated thing. So this data shows to me that all but one of my students read more AR books and took more quizzes during the time they were charting and setting for their goals than the 7 weeks prior to doing that. And some of them took substantially more quizzes. Student 4 and 5 doubled their number of tests that they had taken, and 7 more than doubled what they had been doing.
Christine, we do have a question from the webinar. One of them is in terms of motivation. What were some of the ways that you as a teacher motivated the students to take more quizzes, to progress forward?
Sure. I really want them to learn the intrinsic motivation of reading. I personally don't offer any kind of extrinsic things to help them with their AR. As a school, we do offer rewards. I know a lot of schools have kids, for every 5 or 10 or 15 points, they get a reward. At my building, each student has a goal, and when they make their goal, they get a certificate. If they double that goal, they receive a reward up through quadrupling their goal. So the kids always had that to think about, but as a teacher personally, I don't offer a lot of rewards for AR because I really want my kids to value reading and understand that just because a book may not be an accelerated reader book, it's still a good book.
Right. Well, it sounds like from the beginning you really included each student on their own progression. Do you feel like including them was a huge motivating factor moving forward, that they could chart it and have that progression?
Absolutely. They knew that I was going to talk to them about this. So it made it a priority because they knew that when we sat down together, I was going to talk about the quizzes they had been taking. I was going to talk about the reading they'd been doing at home. So the great news is that not only did their oral reading fluency scores increase, as we saw earlier in the table, but they had an increased ownership for success, which gave them motivation to read more. And that motivation carried over into growth in overall reading level and their reading comprehension scores, which is exciting.
Boy, that was really a snowball effect, wasn't it?
Absolutely, it was. So this table correlates with their AR quizzes. This shows their average comprehension score on a quiz in the 7 weeks prior to beginning the goal setting and charting, and then the 7 weeks that we were doing that particular intervention. And all of the students had comprehension changes. 2 of them went a little down, but the other 5 students had some good positive changes in their overall average AR comprehension score, including 2, actually 3, student 2, student 6, and student 7, who had just huge changes in their average score on a comprehension quiz.
You know, I think it's important when you look at student 6, it would be easy to say, well, 61% is still not passing, but you have to remember that 61% is double the comprehension before, and that's phenomenal for just basically a 2-month period.
Absolutely. And that was when I mentioned earlier that I really wanted us to think about student number 6. That particular student is a shining example of how we need to think about students as overall readers and look at the overall picture, because as you just said, Dr. Brown, their overall comprehension score was still a 61, which we may not look at as something to celebrate, but the fact that they more than doubled what they were understanding before is a huge reason for celebration.
We have another question from the webinar group. One person's wanting to know, did you actively discuss these results with the parents? And if so, specifically, how did student 6's parents feel about these results?
There was a form that went home at the end of each week that went home for parents, where I told parents how their child did on their test that particular week for their oral reading fluency. And these were definitely other results that were shared with parents. And that particular student was very excited because they recognized that they were reading more. I don't know that they understood the gravity of exactly what we were proving by collecting all this data, but definitely there was an increase in intrinsic motivation for my students and recognizing the power of being involved in your own reading success. This graph shows students' average grade level growth. We use the STAR test to measure that, which is a tool developed by Renaissance Learning, who also is in charge of Accelerated Reader. And this shows their average growth throughout the school year. So from September to January, those 7 students grew on average about 2/10 of a grade level. The way that the scale works over on the right is each number, for example, 1.5 means first grade, 5th month, 2.3 means second grade, 3rd month. So the students grew from the beginning to the middle of the year an average of 0.17 of a grade level. When I started the charting, doing the research in March, then we tested again in May, and students grew from January to May. So during the bulk of that time is when they were setting and charting their goals. 0.70, so 7/10 of a grade level gain was made during the period of time in the year when they were actively involved in their reading success.
That's just amazing. You know, it just really, when you start looking at those gold bars, that's just amazing.
And again, student 6, there at the end, in the middle of the year, they were kind of in a slump. They had gone down in their grade level equivalent and then just shoots back up there at the end of the year to really be making progress and closer to 2nd grade level, which this was the end of the year. So the goal would be to have them at 3rd grade level, but they made outstanding progress towards getting there.
You know, I seem to remember you telling me that this was not a particularly easy year in your classroom. What happened that year?
This school year, my school suffered a fire. We were having some construction done, which resulted to a fire in our building. And for the first 5 months of the school year, my classroom and several others were housed across the street in portables, and we lost nearly an hour of instructional time every day just traveling to and from the building for lunch and recess and going to music and PE. So this year definitely was full of challenges for my students, and they overcame that brilliantly, I think. So my challenge for those of you who are participating today is to think about, if this could happen in only 3 months, what could the implications be if students do it all year? So I just want to share with you what I learned during the process of doing this for myself. Like I said before, it's really important to remember that oral reading fluency is a good indicator, of reading success, but it's one indicator. And I have often heard it likened to taking your temperature. If you're sick, the first thing you do is take your temperature to see if there's something else going on. Oral reading fluency is a way to take your students' temperatures as a reader and find out if you need to do some interventions. But we also have to look at where they're at with their reading comprehension. Are they motivated to read? And what is their fluency like? Are they correctly reading with expression? Are they following the cues that are in the text to read the book correctly? So I think the data that I shared in this shows that even if students aren't progressing with their oral reading fluency, though that is the goal, we need to look at other things as well. Personally, for myself, this definitely proved to me that having students take an active role in working towards their own progress and success definitely leads to increased motivation. I saw them spending more time practicing. The AR comprehension quiz results that I shared show that their comprehension markedly increased, and my students had overall higher reading achievement than they were during the period of time before they were doing this.
You know, I think it's very interesting that it really was probably only about a 3-minute intervention for each of these children per week, and yet that really made a difference. That was enough. Just 3, maybe 4 minutes of intervention each week made that child feel special and loved and cared for. And that's a piece of motivation we don't always get to do in the classroom because, gosh, there's 12 million things happening every second.
This was a real quick and easy way to make each kid feel like their learning was important, not only to me, but helping them realize that it was to them as well. So this is how it looks in my classroom, room 10 today. This is one of my students coloring in her graph after her oral reading fluency assessment. And then here are 2 others. And the one on the right, that's my student who is off the chart. So when school started in the fall, in September, my student read 25 correct words per minute. And the goal was hopefully to be in the 60s by January, so he would be on grade level, and then 92 for the end of the year. And he is now off the chart. We've had to add paper to the top, and he is on fire. He is unstoppable now with his reading fluency.
Wow, that is amazing, the results that you're able to show, and it definitely makes me smile and warms my heart a little to see the progress that this one student made, that he's so proud and he's off the charts and you had to tape.
That was a happy teacher moment for me with lots of tears and lots of excitement.
Absolutely. One question that we got from the webinar, especially when it comes back to that motivation piece, what do you tell teachers who feel that maybe first and second graders aren't mature enough to understand the goals or set the goals themselves? How do you respond to that?
I think sometimes I know myself included, I don't give kids enough credit. And if I can maybe go off topic a little bit, I do teach a first and second grade split class. And the thing that was amazing to me is last year was my first year doing that. And one of the big things that I learned, because I have to teach at such high levels, because I have second graders in there as well, my first graders absolutely accepted the challenge that they were given. Even if I was doing 2 separate activities with 2 separate learning goals, if the activities were similar, the first graders naturally went with the instructional level that I had provided to the second graders because they were given that opportunity. So I think that has definitely shown me that when I teach at higher levels, my students learn at higher levels, and kids are absolutely capable of doing this on their own. And they get so excited to see their graph every week going up and up and up. So I would say if you're wishy-washy about doing it, I would definitely encourage anybody to try it.
That's great. Another question that we got actually from the audience that's here today is, were your students' personal goals different very differently from the ones that you'd set for them? You know, did they kind of challenge themselves to be higher, or were they a little apprehensive and want to start off slower?
It was kind of an equal mixture of both. Some of the kids, you know, I say to them, I think you can gain 2 words a week, and they say, well, I think I can gain 10 words a week. And other kids, I say, I think you can do 4 a week, and they say, I'm not sure about that. Can I start off with 1 word a week? So the student goal is absolutely negotiable. We talk about it every week. We look at the progress that they made in relation to their goal, and every week we say, do we need to raise it? Do we need to lower it?
Okay,
Yeah.
that's great. So temperature checks each week as well.
Every week.
That's wonderful. Well, you know, thank you so much. That was wonderful information to share. I mean, the background that you gave, the information, the charts. I mean, I think it all is a great visual representation of what you had achieved and what the students have achieved. You know, so for those of you that are participating on the webinar, you know, as we promised, you can definitely go to our website, which is mat.marygrove.edu, to request a full report of this presentation for your reference that you can go back to at a later date or even share with other instructors in your schools. You can also request a certificate of participation. So we will leave this up on the screen for just a little bit more here so you can write down that web address. So Christine, I'm sure that you definitely credit your education here through Marygrove, especially our master's degree, in helping you formulate this research and go forward in doing this. Can you tell us what the most important reason was for you to earn a master's degree or a master in the art of teaching?
Absolutely. First of all, in the state of Michigan, beginning teachers have to get 18 hours of continuing education to get their professional certificate. So that was when my time was running up and I had to get my 18 credit hours. I was shopping around. I knew that I wasn't just going to stop at 18 credit hours, that I wanted to get my master's degree. The thing I loved about Marygrove is I got to work at my own pace, and I got to take the knowledge that I learned into my classroom on a daily basis. And I love teaching reading. So I knew that when I got my MAT, I would get one in the area of reading instruction and apply my skills into my classroom. And I think Marygrove has an excellent program for anybody who's ready to examine their teaching practices and increase their effectiveness in the classroom.
That's great. So one question I have is, you had mentioned that you knew you didn't want to stop at just those 18 credit hours. You wanted that master's degree. What would be the main difference between just getting those 18 credit hours and the master's degree? What led to that decision?
I really wanted to focus on the reading aspect and improving the way that I'm able to deliver reading instruction in my classroom. So I didn't just want to stop at the 18 hours of the art of teaching. I wanted to continue on to focus in and improve my reading instruction so that I can be the best reading teacher for the students in my room.
That's great, thank you. Well, for those of you that don't know, Christine is not only an educator, but she also has a wonderful blog for teachers that gives a lot of great advice, practical advice and ideas. And you definitely need to check out her blog. It's at www.brainbridgeclass.blogspot.com, which is also up on the screen right now. Do you want to talk a little bit about your blog and what's included?
Sure. My teaching blog is on the web, and I update it very frequently with lots of pictures from my classroom, lots of different ideas to share, and the blogosphere of teachers is a wonderful place to go to get collaboration from other teachers and support from one another and share ideas. So I would definitely recommend people to not only check out my blog, but all the other blogs that are on mine that you can get to get some fabulous ideas that you can put into your classroom.
Boy, it's really impressive what you do with that blog. The best practices of our MAT program really come through in the tips and advice that you're offering. You're a great example of why teachers should earn their master's degree.
Thank you.
Well, speaking to that, Diane, why don't you tell us some of the, being the director of the program, why don't you tell us what you think are some of the best benefits of this program?
Well, I think a lot of people start into this program because, well, let's be frank, they're going to get a pay increase. And education isn't one of the best fields in the world, and we fairly rarely really reward people for what they do. So getting a degree in higher education is one way to increase that monetary output, which helps your family. Really, earning an MAT is an investment in your economic future. Teachers with master's degrees typically enjoy greater job security, too, than those without master's degrees. And they're also more flexible. They can go in a number of different directions.
It's true, but earning your Master in the Art of Teaching is so much more than just economic and job security. I definitely hear you talking a lot, especially at some of the conferences that you and I have been together, about how a master's degree in education, isn't just about what it can do for you, but it's also an investment in what it can do for the children that you teach.
Boy, isn't that true? I went back to school because there were things that I just couldn't do, and burning questions I had, and I was driven to get those answers by going back to school, and I was sure glad I did. Teachers who pursue higher education for themselves are also giving their students an even greater gift of learning. The more you know, the more you can bestow. And furthermore, education is kind of a famine place, and nourishing your soul and nourishing your brain is some things that you can do to help relieve that famine feeling that you get when there's just not enough. Our undergraduate teaching degrees prepare us to walk into the classroom and to handle ourselves professionally, but they only take us so far, right, Christina?
I think that's true. I think as an undergrad, you're not in the thick of it every day, so you don't have a lot to connect what you're learning to. The Masters in the Art of Teaching program gave me tools that I could use every single day to do my job better. It has helped me engage my students in an extremely positive way. I
like the fact that, you've said to me, I didn't know what I didn't know. I think everybody in teaching today would admit that teachers as a profession, we're just not 100% of what we're expected to be because we're expected to be just everything.
That's true. That's true. I think a good Master in the Art of Teaching program like the one here at Marygrove can help you find some solutions for those unexpected challenges.
Boy, challenges, isn't that the case? The changes in the educational climate in this country have caused so many teachers to rethink their role as educators. Are you aware of the fact that half of the people who start off as educators leave before their 5th year? This is an incredible trend we've got to fix. There are 2 ways you can deal with this climate we find ourselves in. You can close your door and you can become a single-celled organism, doing the best you can by yourself and hoping that nobody opens that door and challenges what you're able to do. Or you can actively seek information that will help you solve your students' problems. Well, I think the second way is a better way. Marygrove's MAT is designed to help bring you the tools to answer the students' problems, those burning questions. And we've put it all into one program, which is affordable and accessible.
For those of you that don't know, Marygrove College is an actual, very beautiful brick and mortar school. And it's funny because I learned, even though Christine went through our program, she'd actually never been to the campus before today. So I'm just curious, what were you thinking as you kind of pulled through the gates and saw how beautiful our campus actually is?
It is very beautiful. I really was struck by the character of the buildings, and it is a very beautiful place. And though I appreciated the fact that I could do my coursework in my PJs at my computer if I wanted to late on a Saturday night, it is very comforting to know that there is an established and reputable physical college backing the program.
A lot of people don't realize that Marygrove College has been training teachers since 1905. The campus here in Detroit was built in 1927. It's beautiful. It just reminds you of what college is supposed to be. And we're so proud of it. Marygrove was one of the first accredited colleges to offer the convenience and flexibility of a distance learning master's degree, and we've been doing it for quite a while.
I heard that over the past 10 years, more teachers have earned their Master in the Art of Teaching degree from Marygrove than any other college or university.
That's right. We have about 28,000 graduates in distance learning since 1990. Our program is known for being relevant for today's working educators. We have 4 focus areas. You can get a master's in curriculum, instruction, and assessment, which takes you K-12. That's everybody. That's art teachers, Spanish teachers, French teachers, PE teachers. We've got an elementary reading and literacy program for K-6. We've got an elementary math program for K-5. And we've also got a real tough age to reach, middle level math from 6 to 8. We've got experts in this who've written great classes and can help you. And by the way, our reading and CIA programs are the most popular.
It's true. As an enrollment counselor here, I have definitely been enrolling a lot of students into both of those focuses. But there are definitely some very compelling reasons to choose Marygrove College. And I think one of them is that 88% of our students graduate in less than 2 years, which is quite fast in today's education world.
Well, it's not only fast, it's just amazing. Many of our competitors who have online programs, they bring a lot of students in, but they never leave the program. They never actually graduate. 88% graduation rate is just phenomenal. Our program allows educators flexibility to work at their own pace. Christine mentioned in working in her pajamas, I always talk about people working in their bunny slippers. After the kids go to bed late at night, that's the time when you have to really think seriously about your education. And you don't have to drive to a campus to do that. You can do that right from your home. It's important to let people know you don't have to be online at specific times too. This is an asynchronous program. You have assignments that are due, but you don't have to check in at 8 p.m. You do it when you can do it. It's very doable, and you can do it in less than 2 years.
It's great. And last but not least, our program is definitely affordable.
Yeah, when I was researching for programs that would fit my budget the best, this was definitely an excellent value. It was inclusive, including tuition, and the books were included also. It was easy, but I also want to just say what Dr. Brown said was right about not being online at specific times. And when I was researching programs, that was huge to me, to know that I didn't have to be on my computer every Tuesday from 8 to 10 p.m. I could work when I needed to get my job done, to work around my family schedule.
Well, Christina, that is so great to know what your experience was, and definitely the information that you shared with us. I guess you can see why 90% of our graduates would recommend this program to other teachers. Well, again, thank you to the both of you. It was great to hear everything that you guys had to say. So this definitely concludes our presentation for today. We also thank all of you out there participating, and I hope that you will routinely check our website's blog for more information about our program, and as well on our next MAT webinar. Again, you can go to mat.marygrove.edu for more valuable teacher tips and information. And we just want to provide you with tools to make your job easier. We are currently enrolling for our winter semester, which starts on January 9th. So if I can personally be of assistance to you, please feel free to contact me at the number on your screen or at that email address. Again, my name is Emily, and I'd be happy to walk you through the process or help you get the materials that you need. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day and weekend.